Welcome back to the deep dive. If you've ever been part of a product team, or maybe you just use an app that feels, magically intuitive, you know that the journey from a vague, ambitious idea to something that actually solves a user's problem is, well, it's incredibly complex.
It really is. That's where most projects just stall out, or they over-engineer things, or frankly, they just miss the mark entirely.
And the difficulty isn't usually in the coding, right? It's
Yeah.
in the structure, the decision-making, the pace of learning.
Exactly. Modern product development has evolved way past the giant specification document. It's a continuous, structured process of iteration. And what we're doing today is really pulling back the curtain on the underlying operating system, the essential frameworks and rhythms that top-tier product teams use all over the world.
That's the goal. Our mission today is to give you the ultimate shortcut. We've synthesized all these strategies, these frameworks, and some counterintuitive insights from writing the perfect testable user story all the way to managing the 4 fundamental risks that can kill any product investment.
And this deep dive is tailored for you, the learner, who's curious, but, doesn't want to drown in a bunch of process manuals. We'll provide the clear structure and the specific, memorable examples you need to really gain confidence in understanding and ultimately executing successful digital product management.
Okay, let's unpack this operating system,
Yeah.
and we have to start at the beginning. If the product is a house, we need the architectural plan, which brings us to section 1, the blueprint for building from vision to work items.
In that plan, it always starts with defining the problem, which is traditionally captured in the product requirements document or, the PRD.
The PRD. It has a reputation, doesn't it? People
Mhm.
often think of it as this relic, something from the 90s waterfall era that was just rigid and completely over-engineered.
It does, and we need to redefine it.
So how do we do that? How do we redefine the PRD for agile teams that really rely on speed and flexibility?
The modern PRD it's a foundational document, but it's lightweight. The core definition is the same. It describes what a product or a feature should do and, critically, why. It has to focus on both user needs and the business objectives.
But the difference is,
The crucial difference in an agile context is that it is living and evolving. It is not a fixed contract you sign in blood.
so it serves as more of a guiding star, not a delivery mandate.
Exactly. It focuses exclusively on the desired outcomes, the measurable change in user behavior or business metrics, rather than getting into the weeds of prescribing detailed technical solutions.
It's an input.
It's an input that feeds the execution process rather than governing it. If you discover some new customer information halfway through, well, the PRD gets updated, or maybe it even gets invalidated. That's a good thing.
That framing is so essential. So what are the non-negotiable elements that we have to see in a modern PRD, regardless of the size of the product?
Okay, so every PRD must clearly state the problem statement. What specific pain point are we solving and for whom? Then you need objectives and success metrics, often defined as OKRs, so we know, when the mission's accomplished.
And of course, the user.
Of course, defining the users and personas and their core needs or use cases is absolutely mandatory. You can't skip that.
Okay, and what about the elements that, save the team from headaches and political battles down the road?
That's where assumptions and constraints come in. You're listing out technical boundaries like must integrate with legacy system X, and also things we believe to be true but really need to test. For example, users will intuitively know where to find the setting.
That's a big assumption.
A huge one. But if I had to pick the single most critical section, the one that saves the most pain, it's the out-of-scope items.
Why is explicitly stating what you are not building so vital? I feel like teams always skip this.
They do, and it's a huge mistake.
Mm.
Because the PRD is a political document as much as it is a planning one. By defining the boundaries and stating we're not building a mobile app interface in this phase, or we are not supporting integration with competitor Y, you manage stakeholder expectations proactively.
So it's a tool for alignment.
It's the highest leverage sentence you can write to guard your team's focus. That clarity prevents scope creep, it prevents resource dilution, and it stops those future conflicts that just erode trust.
I really want to focus on that critical distinction between the PRD and the product backlog, because this is where I see so many organizations get confused and they start mixing strategy with tactics.
It's the fundamental separation in modern product development. You have to get this right. The PRD is strategic. It's all about needs, outcomes, and the vision. It moves slowly. It's kind of static-ish.
And the backlog.
The product backlog is purely tactical. It's about the raw work, the tags. It's constantly being ordered, refined, and estimated. It's a living, breathing thing.
So if the PRD is the map showing the region we want to conquer, the backlog is the daily list of errands, construction sites, and supplies we need to get there.
That's a perfect analogy. The entire process is a flow. PRD drives the backlog. And this flow is managed through something called progressive elaboration.
Which is?
It's just the systematic process of taking a high-level goal and breaking it down into smaller, defined, and actionable work items as our understanding deepens over time. You don't define everything on day one.
And that elaboration follows a specific structure, right?
Yeah.
It takes us from that enormous outcome all the way down to the single task a developer is working on. Let's trace that path of decomposition.
Okay, so we start with the high-level outcomes from the PRD. We then group related outcomes into these large containers we call epics.
Okay.
Those epics are then broken down into features, which represent, deliverable chunks of functionality. Features then decompose into user stories, and those stories are enriched with acceptance criteria. And then finally, they get prioritized and placed into the product backlog.
Let's focus on the epic for a second. You said it's a container. How does a PM make sure an epic is well-defined and not just a giant, vague bucket of work?
A good epic delivers a coherent, meaningful business outcome, and, this is crucial, it's too large to finish in one sprint. For instance, if your PRD objective is achieve 50% automated fraud detection, the epic shouldn't just be build fraud detection system. That's too vague.
So what should it be?
Something more like implement rule-based fraud scoring engine. It's specific enough to measure against the overall goal, but it's still broad enough to contain dozens and dozens of stories.
Right. And while epics are essential for that structure, it is worth remembering they aren't official Scrum artifacts. Scrum just uses the generic term product backlog item, or PBI.
Exactly. They're organizational helpers, but the true workhorse of the backlog, the item that actually gets built and tested, is the user story.
And we all know the classic structure. As a user, I want capability, so that benefit. Why is that so that the benefit, the most critical part of the whole thing?
Because it forces the team to connect the work they are doing to the value being delivered. It's the why. If you can't articulate the benefit, you really shouldn't be building it.
Can you give us an example?
Sure. Using that fraud detection system, a story might be, as a security analyst, I want a single dashboard that displays all transactions flagged as high risk.
Okay, that's the why.
So that I can investigate and block fraudulent purchases within 60 seconds. That's the benefit. That's the value.
That clarity immediately highlights the red flag we mentioned earlier. Technical tasks disguised as stories.
Yeah.
Stories that say build database connection or refactor authentication layer.
Those are delivery tasks. They belong beneath the story and the how, but they are not user stories themselves. If a developer needs to refactor the authentication layer to enable the analyst to see the dashboard, then the refactoring is a task supporting the user story. It's not the story itself.
Because product value is measured by the user's ability to complete a job.
Not by lines of code deployed. Exactly.
So to ensure high quality, every PM needs to live by the iNvest model. Let's go through these criteria again, but maybe this time let's focus on the operational challenges of actually achieving each letter.
Absolutely. So the I is for independent. Ideally, stories should be deliverable in any order without functional dependencies on other work.
But that's really difficult in complex enterprise systems. How does a PM push the team to achieve I in a real-world setting? It seems almost impossible sometimes.
It requires a lot of engineering discipline. You achieve independence by deliberately breaking services apart, using things like microservices, separate data stores, or aggressively using feature flags.
The toggles.
Right, the toggles that isolate new functionality. This allows the team to deploy features without actually exposing them to users, which decouples deployment from release. If you can't reorder your stories without breaking the entire system, your stories are probably too big or your architecture is too coupled.
That is a great actionable tip. What about N for negotiable?
The story is not a rigid spec. It's a promise to have a conversation. It should remain negotiable right up until the developers pull it into the current sprint. This means the details, the implementation, all that can and should be discussed and adapted.
Okay, and V is for valuable, which we've covered. It has to deliver value.
Non-negotiable. Then we have E, S, and T, which govern the size and accountability.
Right.
E is for estimable. If the team cannot reasonably size the work, that's a huge red flag. It's a sign that the story is either too big, too vague, or it needs a technical spike to reduce the uncertainty. S is for small. small enough to be completed within one iteration.
And if it's not?
A story that bleeds into the next sprint is a poorly sized story. Plain and simple, it needs to be broken down further.
And finally, T for testable. This is where the rubber really meets the road. If it's not testable, you can't declare it done.
And that takes us directly to acceptance criteria, or AC. AC are the explicit conditions of satisfaction. Their purpose is simple: to remove all ambiguity. They are the measurable outcomes that define whether the story has been successfully implemented.
They enable all the testing, and they inform the definition of done. We talked about using the Gherkin format. Let's provide two clear, distinct examples for you to internalize this format.
Okay, so Gherkin uses the structure given when then. Let's go back to that subscription cancellation example. The story is, as a user, I want to cancel my active subscription.
Okay.
A Gherkin AC for that, focusing on confirmation, might be, given I have an active subscription and I am logged into my account, when I click the cancel subscription button and confirm the dialog, then I should see a message confirming the cancellation and stating the date my access ends.
Super clear and completely testable.
Yeah.
Now, let's try a totally different feature, maybe a search function.
Okay, great idea. Let's look at search filtering.
As a customer, I want to filter search results by brand so that I can quickly narrow down the products I am interested in.
Okay, what's the AC?
So a Gherkin AC, focusing on the functionality, could be, given I have searched for running shoes and the results page is displayed, when I select Nike from the brand filter checklist, then the results should refresh immediately, displaying only products where the brand attribute is Nike, and the total result count should decrease.
That level of specificity just prevents developers and testers from making any assumptions. It requires clear inputs, actions, and measurable results.
And critically, who is responsible for all this? The Scrum Guide is explicit here. The product owner, PO, is accountable for maximizing product value and managing the backlog. But the AC and the breaking down of stories, that is inherently collaborative.
So the PO defines the what and the why.
Right, but the AC are defined with the developers to ensure feasibility and testability. It has to be a team effort.
And all this collaboration is centralized in backlog refinement.
Yes, refinement is the continuous ongoing process, often consuming about 10% of the development team's capacity. It's where they collaborate to ensure the top of the backlog is clear, small, estimated, and ready to pull into the next sprint.
This is where those PRD assumptions get put under the microscope.
Exactly. They get challenged based on new learning. If you neglect refinement, your sprint planning becomes painful and incredibly long.
Let's quickly discuss the common traps we see here. Beyond BDUF big design upfront, what is a subtle but destructive trap that teams fall into?
A really subtle one is the delegated backlog. The PO is accountable for prioritization and value, but they often delegate complete ownership and ordering to, say, a business analyst or even the Scrum Master.
And why is that a problem?
Well, delegation of task management is fine, but when you delegate value prioritization, the team loses its clear vision owner. The product risks becoming just a collection of disjointed features ordered by whoever shouts the loudest in the stakeholder meeting.
That sets the stage perfectly for how we manage the actual complexity of work itself. Now that we have the vision framed and the stories detailed, the central challenge becomes tackling the sheer size of the work. So how do we take that huge idea and slice it small enough to actually start delivering value? That's section 2. Slicing the value estimation and increments.
We have to start by fundamentally reframing what estimation even means.
Right, because in so many organizations, an estimate is immediately seen as a contract, a fixed promise.
And that mindset is the root of so much failure. The modern product perspective, which is championed by figures like Marty Kagan, is that estimation is inherently uncertain because we are building something new. Estimation is not a promise or a guaranteed schedule.
So what is it?
It is a tool for decision-making and, most importantly, for surfacing uncertainty and risk.
So the output of the estimation isn't a date, it's an insight.
Exactly. When a team provides a story point estimate, and one story is 5 points while another is 13, that difference should spark a conversation. Why is the 13-point story so big? Is it complexity? Is it a technical risk? Is the requirement just vague? The purpose is insight, which allows us to reduce that 13-point risk, maybe by slicing it further or by doing a technical spike.
We estimate to guide prioritization.
Not to set stone-cold deadlines.
That ability to reduce risk by breaking down work brings us to what you called the core PM superpower, slicing.
Slicing is the art of breaking a massive product idea into the smallest possible increments that still deliver either value or measurable learning. A good slice is truly minimal, it's testable, it reduces one of the four big risks we'll discuss later, and it's built relatively independently.
And you said the single most important distinction in slicing is vertical versus horizontal slicing. This is like the acid test of a successful agile team.
It really is. Think of it using the layer cake analogy. Horizontal slicing is weak practice. It's like taking the cake and slicing it into layers. The bottom layer is the database, the next is the API, the top is the frosting, or the UI.
So you have three complete layers.
But no single piece is a complete cake that the user can actually eat. The user gets zero value until all three layers are finished and integrated.
And that creates massive internal waste because you have components just sitting there ready, but they can't be used, tested, or shipped.
Precisely. The goal is vertical slicing. That's strong practice. This is where you slice the cake from top to bottom, making sure every slice is a complete user flow that crosses the UI, the API, and the database layers. The slice delivers one complete job to be done.
Can you give an example?
Sure. If you're building an e-commerce checkout, a vertical slice might be enable a guest user to pay for one item using only PayPal. That touches every single technical layer and delivers immediate testable value.
So we slice to deliver value, but we should also be slicing to reduce risk, right?
Always. The number one rule is to slice by risk. Don't just slice arbitrarily by size. You have to constantly ask, what is the most fragile, unproven assumption this whole idea rests on? If an assumption about user behavior or technical feasibility is proven wrong, we have to find that out immediately.
So the fastest path to validated learning is the best slice.
That's the one.
This whole philosophy is why we need to dive deep into that acronym soup that defines product increments. MVP, MLP, and MMP. This is where teams so often mix up their goals.
Let's define them by their primary goal. The MVP, minimum viable product, is focused entirely on learning.
Not delight, not scale, just learning.
Correct. Its primary goal is to validate assumptions, often the value risk, which is do users even want this, or the usability risk. It's the smallest thing you can possibly build to prove or disprove a hypothesis.
And the anti-pattern here is?
The anti-pattern is treating the MVP as a small, shoddy version of your final product. It's not a launch candidate, it's an experiment.
And sometimes an MVP doesn't even involve writing a single line of code.
Absolutely. Many of the most successful MVPs were non-coded. A concierge MVP where the team manually performs the service behind a basic landing page. A fake door test, which is a button promising a feature that isn't built yet, just to gauge click interest. Or even simple high-fidelity prototypes used in user tests.
The success metric is knowledge gained, not tickets closed.
Exactly. Moving beyond that learning phase, we encounter the MLP, minimum lovable product.
Okay, what's the focus here?
The MLP shifts focus to adoption and early traction. Its primary goal is emotional engagement. You validated that the core idea is valuable, but now you need to differentiate and generate some organic adoption. It has to deliver one thing exceptionally well, providing a delightful experience that turns your early users into advocates.
This is where designers push past just usable and start focusing on memorable.
Yes. And finally, the goal everyone usually thinks of when they say launch, the MMP, minimum marketable product.
And this is all about?
The MMP is focused on commercial readiness and scale. Its primary goal is revenue and sustainable growth. This is the product that includes all the necessary enterprise infrastructure: compliance, robust scalability, customer support documentation, pricing structures, and reliable billing mechanisms. This is the first product you can really take to market and monetize.
The lesson here is that they are sequential, but their focus is entirely different. MVP reduces risk, MMP enables revenue. A team that tries to make its MVP instantly ready for scale they're guaranteed to fail.
Or at least launch a product that no one cares about. It's a massive resource drain.
Yeah.
The key is to slice first, estimate later. Estimate small slices, not large epics. If you estimate a 6-month epic, you have 0 opportunities to adjust your plan based on learning until month 6.
But if you estimate 2-week slices,
you have 12 opportunities to pivot based on user feedback. It maximizes your learning velocity.
A quick note on pitfalls here. Treating the MVP as a launch is the #1 mistake. But what about the pitfall of getting too obsessed with the technical side of estimation?
That's a great one. Trying to achieve false precision. Insisting on calculating estimates down to the hour or day when you're dealing with high uncertainty. Use story points, use t-shirt sizes, use buckets, whatever you use. Frame it clearly as a range, not a fixed date.
Your job as a PM is to be a guardian of realistic expectations.
Exactly. Based on current knowledge, which means transparently stating the high risk involved in large, unvalidated estimates.
Okay, so from the first small increment, we now have to establish the mechanism for continuous delivery, that predictable clockwork that turns stories into shippable code. Let's move into section 3. Setting the rhythm, sprint planning, and sprint goals.
Sprint planning is the heartbeat of the delivery engine. It's a dedicated, time-boxed, collaborative event that happens once per sprint to lay out the work and, critically, to establish a shared mission.
And the output is a forecast, a highly informed prediction, but it's not a guaranteed scope commitment.
Precisely. For a 2-week sprint, you're looking at 2 to 4 hours max, and it involves the entire Scrum team. The product owner brings the prioritized, ready-to-work backlog items and the vision for value. The developers determine how much work they can forecast and how they will execute it. And the Scrum Master makes sure the event is effective and keeps time.
The 2020 Scrum Guide streamlined sprint planning into 3 required topics to make sure the team focuses on value first and then execution. Let's walk through the necessity of each one.
Okay, topic 1. Why is this sprint valuable? This is the value proposition discussion. The PO proposes a slice of the product goal the team can tackle now. The team discusses it, and based on that alignment, they create the sprint goal. This is the single mission statement for the entire iteration.
So once they agree on the mission, they decide what work will actually accomplish it. That's topic 2. What can be done?
And here, the developers take the lead. They look at their capacity counting for any vacation days, support rotations, holidays, and they pull the necessary product backlog items, PBIs, from the top of the ordered backlog. They only select the items they confidently believe they can complete to achieve that sprint goal.
Okay, and finally, topic 3. How will the chosen work get done?
This is the detailed delivery plan. The developers break those high-level PBIs into specific small tasks, coding tasks, testing tasks, documentation updates. They discuss the architectural approach, the testing strategy, and how they'll collaborate. The result of these 3 topics is the sprint backlog, which is the plan, the PBIs, and that commitment to the sprint goal.
And the most important output of that planning is the sprint goal. Why is having a single, coherent objective so essential for high-performing teams?
Because it acts as the team's anchor. It provides flexibility and scope. The chosen PBIs are highly likely to change. Complexity might be higher than expected, a dependency might delay things, but the team's focus, the sprint goal, that remains stable.
It allows the developers and the PO to negotiate which PBIs they work on.
Without losing sight of the overall mission, yes.
So, if the product goal is something large, say, become the leading platform for independent contractors in Europe, a strong sprint goal is a clear step towards that.
Exactly. A great sprint goal would be something like, enable contractors in the UK market to complete mandatory digital identity verification so that we can process their first payment. It's an outcome, it's testable, and it moves the needle.
And it links explicitly to the Scrum commitment structure.
It does. The sprint backlog commits to the sprint goal, and the sprint goal is a step toward that overarching product goal.
Let's focus on drafting effective goals. You mentioned the contrast between a good outcome-oriented goal and a poor laundry list goal. Give us the actionable template.
Okay, so we want to use the template. Enable persona to do something so that benefit. A good goal is launch the new referral module for our top 1,000 active users so that we can validate the adoption rate before a full-scale launch.
And a bad one.
A poor goal is just a list of tasks. Finish stories 101, 102, 103, and deploy the remaining stories from last sprint.
The poor goal doesn't communicate any value to anyone, nor does it give the team a cohesive mission.
Not at all. And that leads to a critical point on adaptation during the sprint. The sprint goal is stable, but the scope is flexible.
Okay, let me challenge you here based on some real-world friction. If the sprint goal is the anchor, but the developers discover in the first 3 days that, say, 70% of the selected PBIs unexpectedly fail feasibility checks, they require a massive architectural refactor that's going to take 2 sprints, is the PO mandated to keep the sprint alive, or is it more responsible to just cut bait?
That's a classic real-world dilemma. The product owner and the developers have to collaborate. If that feasibility failure makes the sprint goal truly unachievable, meaning you cannot deliver that promised value, even by substituting the PBIs with smaller ones, then it is absolutely more responsible to cancel the sprint immediately.
You don't just push through.
No. Continuing a sprint towards an impossible goal just burns resources and morale. Cancellation is a rare, but it's a necessary tool for rapid adaptation when your assumptions are catastrophically invalidated.
That level of transparency is crucial. Let's quickly review the anti-patterns we see in this section.
The two biggest anti-patterns: having no sprint goal or relying on those laundry list goals. Without a unified goal, the team just operates as a collection of individuals, not a cohesive unit.
And the other one.
The other dangerous anti-pattern is a PO dictating the forecast, treating the developers like a delivery pipeline. This violates their self-managing mandate, and it destroys ownership. It inevitably leads to missed deadlines and low-quality increments.
The sprint provides the necessary rhythm for delivery work, but a PM's job is much, much broader. It includes strategy, discovery, constant communication. We need a system that governs all of that. Let's move into Section 4, the PM operating system cadences and rituals.
This is where we separate the high-performing product team from the feature factory. We are talking about establishing cadence, that predictable rhythm for decisions, and rituals, the specific recurring activities that guard time for high-value work.
And why is this protective element so important?
Because PMs are constantly bombarded by requests, by crises, by status meetings. Without a defined operating system, they just fall into project management tracking tickets instead of true product management, which is understanding the customer, data analysis, and strategy.
So cadence has to guard time for deep strategic thought, and most importantly, for discovery.
It has to. This aligns perfectly with the principles of the Empowered Product Team, popularized by Silicon Valley Product Group, or SVPG.
And an empowered team is?
An empowered team is cross-functional, and it owns the outcome. They are judged on whether they solved the problem, not just on whether they delivered a list of features. A feature factory is judged only on output. How many tickets did they ship? Your rituals should be entirely focused on inspecting outcomes, not just cracking ticket velocity.
And speaking of outcomes, we have to discuss the single, non-negotiable ritual: continuous discovery.
This is non-negotiable for a reason. If you are not constantly in contact with your users, you are basing your multi-million-dollar investments on pure assumptions. SVPG guidance is crystal clear on this. A healthy team needs a bare minimum of 2 to 3 hours of direct customer contact per week, every week.
That's a huge commitment, especially for busy PMs. How do we institutionalize that?
You schedule it and you fiercely protect discovery time. This means mandatory weekly rituals for customer interviews, for usability tests, for contextual inquiries, and it shouldn't just be the PM. We need designers and engineers observing these sessions to build that shared empathy.
Let's break down an example of a strong, outcome-focused weekly cadence that integrates discovery and delivery Monday through Friday.
Okay, so we structure the week around alignment and learning cycles. We start with the weekly outcomes and planning on Monday. This ritual is short, maybe 60, 90 minutes. You review last week's key metrics, your OKRs, you look at what shipped, and you agree on this week's single highest priority outcome goal.
And that involves both delivery and discovery.
Both. You agree on the main delivery bet and the main discovery experiment for the week. That sets the internal compass. Then you commit to learning.
Which means?
Discovery Tuesdays are locked down. After the 2-3 hours of customer sessions, the team must immediately move to synthesis. This is where PMs use techniques like affinity mapping, grouping interview notes into themes, and the 5 whys, asking why repeatedly to get to the root user need.
That synthesis session is as critical as the interview itself.
It is, and Wednesday is where refinement ensures that Tuesday's learning informs Friday's planning.
So how does that work?
Backlog refinement on Wednesday must include reviewing those discovery artifacts. Did the prototype test invalidate our pricing hypothesis? If so, the backlog items tied to the old pricing model must be deprioritized or deleted. This ensures the delivery backlog is constantly shaped by real insights. It's how you avoid the feature factory pattern.
Thursday often suffers from just being fragmented with meetings. How do we protect time for that high-altitude thinking?
You need a strategic focus block on Thursday. This is 2-3 hours of deep, dedicated, protected time for the PM and the design lead. No meetings, no Slack. This is for analysis. Digging into metrics, dashboards, refining the multi-quarter strategy, updating the PRD, writing critical communication docs. If you don't block this time, it will be consumed by low-value operational tasks.
And we wrap up the week with inspection and process improvement.
Demo and Retro Friday. And the demo has to include showing not just the coded increment, but also the discovery artifacts from Tuesday, what we learned from prototypes and interviews. The retrospective ritual then inspects not only delivery speed, but, crucially, how the team's rituals supported or hindered achieving the weekly outcome goal.
Okay, now let's zoom out to the quarterly cadence, which shapes the overarching strategy.
Right. Weekly is execution. Quarterly is focus. The quarterly rhythm starts with problem framing. Before you set new goals, you dedicate time to revisit the vision and prioritize key opportunities based on all the learning from the previous 12 weeks. This ensures the team is tackling the highest leverage problems, not just the easiest features.
This naturally leads into OKR setting.
It does, defining 2 to 4 outcome-based objectives and quantitative key results that the team can directly influence. For example, objective, improve customer retention, key result, reduce churn rate for small business clients from 15% to 10% by the end of Q3.
And the critical ritual here is the check-in.
The fortnightly OKR check-in. Teams need to monitor their confidence score in hitting the KR and be ready to pivot their underlying bets if that confidence drops below a critical threshold.
And the roadmap review follows. It's not a fixed contract. It's a communication tool about direction.
Use the now, next, later structure. The quarterly review validates that the current now bets align with the OKRs, it helps identify critical cross-team dependencies for the next phase, and it gives stakeholders a clear, non-committal view of the future direction.
What are the biggest pitfalls that sabotage a perfectly structured operating system like this?
Pitfall 1, discovery starvation. The team perpetually says, we'll talk to customers after we ship this feature. This is organizational suicide. The fix. Make customer contact non-negotiable and include it in your weekly planning.
And the second one.
Pitfall 2. Feature factory cadence. Your meetings are 90% tracking tasks and 10% strategy. The fix. Refocus the weekly and quarterly rituals entirely around outcome reviews and problem solving.
Building a product is complex, and complexity inevitably involves uncertainty. Our operating system needs to be robust enough to anticipate trouble, which brings us to Section 5, anticipating trouble, risk management, and dependencies.
Every decision to invest time, money, or resources is fundamentally a risk decision. Risk, simply defined, is an uncertain event that could impact your objectives, positively or negatively. If you don't proactively identify and manage risks, you're not building a product, you're just playing roulette.
And to make this manageable, the SVPG framework distills the universe of product risk into 4 essential categories that must be addressed during discovery. Let's deep dive into the 4 big product risks.
First, and arguably most important, is value risk. The question here is, will customers use it and will they choose to pay for it? This is the PM's core domain. Mitigation involves customer interviews, A/B testing pricing models, and concierge MVPs. If you get this wrong, you build a perfectly engineered product that solves a problem nobody has.
Second is usability risk.
Can users figure out how to use it effectively? Are the workflows intuitive? This belongs to the product designer. Mitigation involves low-fidelity and high-fidelity prototypes, remote usability testing, and heat map analysis. If you get this wrong, you have a valuable solution that's just hidden behind confusing interfaces.
Third, the domain of the delivery team, feasibility risk.
Can engineers build it with the available time, skills, and technology? Does it scale? Will it integrate with that legacy system? This is owned by the lead engineer or tech lead. Mitigation involves technical spikes, small, time-boxed experiments to test an unfamiliar technology architecture reviews, and stress testing. This risk has to be addressed before you commit to a delivery plan.
And finally, the necessary operational context, business viability risk.
Does the solution work for the business overall? This is a broad category that includes legal compliance, sales training costs, marketing costs, data storage, monetization models, and whether it cannibalizes existing high-revenue products. The product manager owns this, often acting as a bridge to legal, finance, and sales teams.
And by assigning clear ownership to these 4 risks, you prevent that common failure mode where everyone assumes someone else checked the legal or feasibility box.
Exactly. And documenting this is essential, which leads us to the risk register.
This document is the single source of truth for your product threats. Beyond the standard description, cause, and impact, what are the most crucial fields a PM must include in a practical risk register?
You must include the designated risk owner. Accountability is everything. The owner is responsible for monitoring the risk and executing the response. You also need planned response strategies, mitigation actions. What will we do if the risk materializes? And, crucially, a section for triggers.
A trigger being an early warning sign.
Yes. For a value risk, a trigger might be initial prototype conversion rate is below 5%. For a feasibility risk, a trigger might be the technical spike exceeds its 2-day time box.
So once identified and analyzed, we move to the response strategies for these threats.
We have 4 strategies. Avoid means eliminating the root cause, usually by changing the scope or plan entirely. Mitigate means taking action to reduce the probability or the impact, like prototyping more to reduce usability risk. Transfer means shifting the impact to a third party, like outsourcing or getting insurance. And accept means acknowledging the risk but choosing to do nothing proactive other than monitoring it.
Which you'd use for low probability, low impact issues.
Correct. Now let's pivot to the leading cause of schedule slippage: dependencies.
The Achilles heel of any plan.
For sure. A dependency just means the success of your task relies on a condition being met by a separate, often external body of work,
We use logical relationships to describe these. The most common is finish to start, FS.
which means task B cannot start until task A has finished. An example would be you can't start testing the new API integration until the external vendor finishes deploying the API in their sandbox environment.
But the more complex ones are often start to start, SS, and finish to finish, FF. Can you give us a clear, practical example for start to start?
FS means task B cannot start until task A has started. This is often used for coordination. So for example, the front-end team can't start creating the detailed UI components, task B, until the design team has started creating the final high-fidelity mockups, task A. They don't need the designs to be finished, but they need the flow of design work to have started.
I want to challenge that. Why would a PM ever choose SS over FS? Doesn't SS increase risk because the dependency is still ongoing while you're working?
That's a great question. You choose SS to achieve compression, or parallel work, which can speed up the schedule. For instance, testing of a complex module, task B, might start as soon as the development of that module, task A, starts. This allows the test team to write and execute basic component tests while code is still being finished.
So it's a trade-off.
It requires much closer coordination and communication, but it can shave weeks off a complex schedule. It's a trade-off. Higher risk for a faster time to market.
And we have to differentiate between internal and external dependencies.
We do. External dependencies, relying on a third-party vendor, a regulatory body, or another organization outside your control, are generally higher risk simply because you have no control over their priorities or their internal processes.
Which means every critical dependency should translate directly into a corresponding risk in your register. This is the value of dependency mapping.
Dependency mapping is essential for any multi-team work. It creates a visual graph showing all the nodes and arrows, how your payment feature relies on the billing team's new service, which in turn relies on the compliance team's sign-off. The map just makes bottlenecks and the critical path visible.
Let's use that complex example. If your team is building a new KYC Know Your Customer module, and it relies on the internal compliance API team to finalize their database schema.
Okay, that's an internal finish to start dependency. The risk entry in your register would be compliance API team delays schema completion by 4 weeks. Impact: high, probability, medium.
And the mitigation.
The mitigation strategy would be schedule daily stand-ups with the API tech lead and ensure your team builds a temporary mocked schema as a fallback so you can continue integration testing. This level of detail elevates risk management from just documentation to active problem solving.
We've built the product, sliced it, set the rhythm, and managed the risks. Now we have to connect that solution with the people who actually need it. That brings us to Section 6, making the connection, launch planning, and GTM.
And we begin with the crucial mindset shift. Launch is a milestone, not success.
I have seen too many organizations celebrate a launch with champagne only to realize 3 months later that nobody adopted the product or the revenue targets were missed by 80%.
Exactly. Launch is when the solution becomes available to the market. Success is measured by sustained adoption, measurable behavior change, and positive commercial impact after the launch. We have to avoid the organizational trap of confusing output, which is the launch, with the outcome, which is success.
The post-launch iteration phase is where the real learning accelerates.
It is. And this is where we need a clear division of labor, specifically between the product manager, PM, and the product marketing manager, PM.
Okay, so the PM owns.
The PM owns the solution and the value it delivers. They validate the 4 risks, they ensure the product solves the problem, and they define the market opportunity. The PMM owns the story and the go-to-market execution.
What does the PMM specifically own in that execution?
Positioning, messaging, the launch campaign, sales enablement materials, and public relations. PMM work ensures that the value the PM helped create is discovered, understood, and effectively adopted by the target audience. If your organization lacks PMs, the PM has to consciously ring-fence time to execute those duties, or the product will just launch silently.
And the PMM's work culminates in the go-to-market GTM strategy. What are the essential components of a robust GTM?
GTM defines how you move from product readiness to mass adoption. It covers the sales channels, the pricing strategy, and the path from customer awareness all the way to activation. A strong GTM must explicitly reinforce the product's mitigations against the four risks. For instance, if you mitigated usability risk through extensive testing, the GTM should lean heavily on simple, clear onboarding documentation and quick time-to-value messaging.
Before you can even address external customers, you have to align everyone internally. What are the key elements of internal communications?
Internal alignment is all about operational readiness. You need a single internal launch brief detailing the what, why, who, and when. And crucially, sales and support teams need detailed FAQs, objection handling scripts, and bug triage procedures before the customer ever sees the feature. A failed launch often starts with a customer service rep who hasn't been trained on the new feature.
The PMM then takes the reins for the external communications.
And this is all about resonance. Developing a crisp positioning statement, tailoring messaging to different customer personas, updating the website and app store copy, and coordinating press outreach and social media campaigns. The goal is to articulate the unique value proposition in a way that cuts through all the market noise.
And most experts advise against the Big Bang launch. That's why we use rollout strategies.
Big bang launches are exponentially risky because if a flaw is found, the reputational and financial damage is immediate and widespread. Safer launches are phased. You start with internal dogfooding, then a private beta with maybe 100 select customers, then maybe a soft launch in a small, low-risk geographical market.
The ultimate sophisticated approach, especially in SaaS, is the gradual or progressive rollout.
This is where you ramp up traffic gradually, perhaps by cohort or by percentage. You launch the new feature to 1% of users. You monitor operational health metrics like error rates and latency for 24 hours. If everything's green, you go to 5%, then 25%.
This ramp-up gives you fast rollback capability.
Exactly. If you find a critical bug at 5%, you immediately flip the feature flag back to 0% before 95% of your users even know it existed.
That protection is vital. Finally, if launch is not success, we need to know how to measure the real results. What are the layers of metrics we have to track?
You need layered metrics to find pre-launch. Start with reach and awareness website traffic, email open rates. Then measure engagement and adoption activation rate, how many users tried the feature. Next is the critical layer, behavior and outcomes. Did the feature reduce the time it takes for a user to complete a task? Did it increase conversion in the funnel?
And then the commercial health.
Yes. Commercial impact, which is revenue uplift, reduction in churn, reduction in support costs. And finally, always monitor operational health error rates, server load, crash reports. If your feature drives massive revenue but collapses the servers daily, it's not a success.
And once that button is pushed, we need a rapid response plan.
The post-launch period requires a heightened alert phase, often called a war room. Engineering, product, and support have to monitor real-time dashboards and feedback streams, ready to address high-impact issues within minutes. The learning cycle accelerates here as real production data replaces all your lab tests.
If we recap the launch pitfalls, what is the single biggest mistake our learners should avoid?
I think the biggest mistake is the lack of alignment between product and marketing. If the PMM defines the messaging based on what they think the product does, and the PM built the product based on what the engineers thought was feasible, the launch will fail to resonate. Clear GTM ownership and early, frequent collaboration are the only defense.
That was a tremendous dive into the PM operating system. We've gone from the high-level PRD to the tactical sprint goal, dissected why the MVP has to be an experiment for learning, and built an entire rhythm of weekly and quarterly rituals, all while learning how to systematically manage those four critical product risks: value, usability, feasibility, and viability.
The key takeaway is clear. Successful product management is not about executing a rigid plan. It's the structured, relentless pursuit of validated learning. You slice work to learn, you set a rhythm to learn, and you launch in careful, phased increments to accelerate that learning. The best systems maximize the velocity of gaining market knowledge, not just the velocity of code deployment.
That brings us to our final provocative thought for you, the learner, to consider this week. If your team's most frequent ritual is only tracking ticket completion, not challenging assumptions, not discussing recent customer interviews, or reviewing whether your outcomes are shifting, are you truly managing a product, or are you just efficiently running a feature factory?
What specific step will you take next week to fiercely guard time for that essential continuous discovery?